that sex has to decline, and it has to decline in quantity, it has to decline in quality the longer we're with somebody. But it's ludicrous when you think about it around like, oh, you're practicing something over and over and over again and you get worse of it. So it's about how we practice.
It's just so beautiful because what I teach is the longer, the deeper, and it's all in our mind. So just to be clear, so people really hear that, you don't believe the longer we stay in relationships, the less and worse sex we have.
I believe actually the opposite.
Welcome to this episode of Sexually Empowered Treating to One podcast. And today I have a beautiful Dr. Diane Mueller, and she's in Colorado, my dream place. Really want to go there. Welcome, Diane.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, and I'll just introduce you. Dr. Diane Mueller. She's a board-certified sexologist with dual doctorates, which is amazing. That's a lot of studying. So in Naturopathic and Acupuncture and Oriental medicine. And she's the founder of the sex education center, mylibido.com. She hosts the Libido Lounge podcast. It's so nice to talk about libido and our sexual desire. That's exactly what we're going to be talking about. And she helps monogamous couples create more passion, desire, and hotter sex and better communication. And I really love your focus on monogamous couples. Often couples think that to bring that passion back, especially in long-term relationships, it's like we need to either open our relationship or we need to change a partner. Let's dive into this conversation. I wonder, what would you say are the biggest mistakes, maybe problems couples have that kill that passion?
There's so many. And I think let's start with one of it. One of the problems comes with the mind and the belief. And so to illustrate this, I'll tell a quick story of how I got involved in this work. There's many components of how I got involved in this work. But one influential thing was I was listening to a lecture from Richard Bandler, who's the co-founder of neuro-linguistic programming, known as NLP. And he was talking about when he was getting ready to get married, so many people came up to him and were like, well, you better have sex now because it's going to go down the drain later. Like it's going to fall down, right? It's going to go down. It's going to go down. It's going to get worse. And being somebody that co-founded a methodology that is about the mind and the beliefs and reprogramming, he questioned it. And this was his question that I encourage a lot of people to ask themselves, which is, where else in life do we practice something over and over and over again and get worse at it? Right? And so that's like to answer your question.
That's such a cool question. I love
it.
I love it.
The first thing, and then I'll give you some more techniques and some other things that are more actionable, like we were talking about offline. But one of the first things I think is to start breaking down this construct. Like we have this construct that we've been taught by society, and there's just almost this unknown belief, meaning unknown as to where it comes from, that sex has to decline, and it has to decline in quantity, it has to decline in quality the longer we're with somebody. But it's ludicrous when you think about it around like, oh, you're practicing something over and over and over again and you get worse of it. So it's about how we practice. So I want to pause in case you have questions on that, and then I can go on.
It's just so beautiful because what I teach is the longer, the deeper, that actually, and it's all in our mind. So just to be clear, so people really hear that. So you don't believe the longer we stay in relationships, the less and worse sex we have.
I believe actually the opposite. If we have the training, if we have the tools, if we have the education, because left to our own devices without anything to intervene, that can happen. And I can give you all the sciencey, research reasons from a standpoint of data and mechanism if we're interested in it. But I like using the guitar while we're on our practicing, analogy. I like using the guitar as an analogy. So think about this. Think about somebody that's learning to play the guitar, and they're going to practice every day, but they're only going to practice the G chord, the C chord, and the D chord, and they're going to do nothing else. Well, we can practice the G chord, the C chord, the D chord for years. And if that's all we're doing, we're practicing guitar, it probably is going to get boring. We're probably right? It's and we're not going to really advance in our techniques and our guitar playing. And so the same thing happens with sex. It's we start and we get our G chord or C chord or D chord in the beginning of the relationship. And it's hot in the beginning, just like learning a new instrument is exciting. Wow, I really got this chord down and I can switch between these two chords and it's great and it's fun. And that's what happens in that new relationship energy. But then the newness and the dopamine and the brain chemicals that are exciting with the newness, they wear off. And now we're left doing the G chord, the C chord, the D chord over and over and over again, right?
Yeah. It's so beautiful because I talk about how, as women, we need to expand our erotic flavors. So that's the same
Yes.
idea of actually expanding ourselves. And because I'm a couple therapist, and I see how
Yes.
people get stuck in their dynamic, and it becomes, you know what happens? And I was like wondering, does it really have to happen? But it sounds like what happens, and I see it again and again. It's like this contraction, like we started with more openness, but the more we stay together, we start to contract, we start to really get into our roles, and it becomes so tight. And then there's
Yes.
breathing space, and then there's no attraction. So, what are your like? Yeah, can we talk like to couples who are like in that space? It's like, ah!
Yeah, well, I mean, what you're describing is exactly what happens, right? That contraction and some of that happens all, not all, but largely due to the brain hormone, the brain neurotransmitter dopamine. And so if we go back to like the new relationship energy, right? We look at what's happening to the brain on new relationship drug, right?
Mhm.
And the brain basically what happens is anytime we have the space between are they going to call, are they going to text, when is our next date, all of that, that will increase dopamine, which drives us to feeling that feeling of motivation and wanting to move closer to this person. And then when they do call or they do text or they do ask us on another date or we kiss for the first time, then it surges this
Mm.
dopamine through the brain. So it's all a dopamine and this chemical is about motivation to the thing as well as reward when we get it. And so this goes on oftentimes for 6 to 18 months is a common amount of time.
It is, huh?
Right, yeah, it really is. And then somewhere along the lines, we start to combine our lives more, whether it's giving somebody a key to our place, moving in, getting married, having children. The lives start to combine. And what winds up happening is rather than, hmm, are they going to call? I don't
Yeah.
know. In the space, it's like, well, of course they're going to call. Like, not only are they going to call, I'm going to see them at breakfast. We're going to text 3 times throughout the day. I'm going to see them at dinner. I'm going to see them here. And I don't even have to ask. They're just going to be there. And so
So
because of
predictable, huh?
that, it's predictable. And that's in my opinion like a beautiful part about
Mm.
monogamy, right? Because with the predictability is
A
safety,
safety.
it's right. And that's huge
Mm.
for really beginning to go deep. But we have to create that novelty. Part of the how we create that dopamine is through some level of space and
Mm.
some level of that wanting by that erotic, those erotic flavors
Erotic
you're
flavor.
talking. So what I'm saying, right, is in order to create that dopamine, we need to one have a little more space oftentimes as well as to create that novelty. So then the novelty comes in, and like you and I were talking offline, like where so many people wind up getting in their relationships with this is, well, the way to create novelty is to open up the marriage, to open
Yeah.
up the relationship, then bring that other person in. And I've
That
tried
brings
that.
the safety, huh?
Yeah, you like it's so many things. And that can be the right thing for some people, right? I'm not here to like to analyze. It's not a, conversation on is it good, is it bad? I've seen it work for some people. I've seen it completely tear apart relationships. And a lot of times why people enter those types of scenarios is because they start asking themselves the questions and they're feeling this some sort of lack in their relationship of like lack of excitement, lack of closeness, lack of intimacy, lack of desire, right? And we want to feel these feelings initially, like innately as humans. And so then there's ways to actually bring in a lot of what I teach is like, how do we bring those ways in of excitement, of passion, all of these things through novelty in the context with still maintaining the safety of monogamy?
Love them. Because that's like, and I know, like for me, right? And I've kind of tried it. It's not my way. It doesn't work for me.
Ditto.
So yeah, so it's like for some people it does, but when it doesn't, it doesn't. And we kind of know it, huh? And we can push
Yeah.
ourselves, but actually if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of people get into these things like the open relationships because of these reasons we're mentioning. but they don't like, it's really difficult to stay in the fantasy of it without playing out in the mind the reality. So the fantasy is like, wow, this is going to be so hot to like go on a date and have sex with another human. Sure. I mean, I still see that even though I'm very monogamous, I still see the hotness in that. Like I'm still, still human. But a lot of people don't play out other things, right? Like, well, how is it going to feel like when your partner that you've been with for years comes home and they are radiating this energy because they just had the hottest date ever? And how are you going to feel when they're texting them? And how are you going to feel when like you can feel them falling in love or they want to take a vacation with them or there's so many details that like need to get navigated that people
So
don't
we're not
play
gonna
out.
go there. Yeah, so
Yeah.
this is for people who know this is not for me.
Great.
Yeah, and
Perfect.
it could be right for some people it's the right way, but that's not for people. Yeah. So what are other ways? How to bring that novelty? Because that's the conflict, right? Of this, we want variety and we want safety.
Correct.
That's
So the
how do we do that?
So the way I offer this or the way I teach this is people, places, and things. And I'll give your audience later places where they can get lists like this. But for now, like ways to think about this and get your creative mind going
Mm.
are categories: people, places, things for novelty. So and I have found that most anything we do novelty wise can fall into these categories. So, people, well, what falls into the people category of monogamy? This is where we get into things like role playing, right? So role playing can be fun. Dressing up, like wearing wigs, can sometimes embody a different human, different part of ourselves. Or one of my favorite ways of bringing novelty through people is by sinking into different archetypes. So Carl Jung, for anybody that knows his work, taught a lot about archetypes, and there's a lot of different teachings around this. Around we all have these different kind of like personalities that make up us. We have the personality that's like from a sexual standpoint, we might have the part of ourselves that's a little bit more of a teaser. We might have the part of ourselves that's a little more like intense, right? And so we can do things where we can do exercises, we can turn on music, we can do movement to embody and say, you know what? Today, this teaser part of myself is going to come out and I'm going to really feel like if I was like, to like help you embody this, like think of that like that, like stereotypical high school cheerleader type of, personality. Maybe that's not your personality, but we all have little tiny pieces of this inside of us. So, how would that part of me that never gets to have a voice, right? Because this part is maybe not as alive inside of me. How does that part of me make love?
Mm.
How does the part that's more intense, that's like more rough around the edges, how does that part? And sometimes it's so interesting when I do this work internally and then bring it into my sex life because sometimes my boyfriend knows what I'm doing. And other times he's like, we'll get done. And he's like, well, what was that? Like he can tell the energy is different. So he notices the novelty, but I haven't even shared to him that I like what I am doing to show up differently in that moment. So that's people. Yeah.
That's one way I talk about expanding your erotic flavors. So really getting people, and quite often I find what's useful is to find people you're attracted to, like actors, some famous people, and people you're repelled, and try and embody both because there's something in us that gets touched. So it means we have parts of it, and that's how we can really expand it, and then it's never boring. I guess taking some acting classes are really useful for your sex life, huh?
Oh, very much so. Improv, acting, all of it. And this part that like doesn't get expressed, right? Like that's sometimes where the word shadow gets thrown around, right? And it's like it's that part of ourselves that maybe we're judging a little bit. And
Yeah,
usually if we're judging, we find ourselves judging ourselves or
there's
others.
some
There's something there,
there's something,
right?
but I wonder because some people might think, oh, that's not being authentic, and I want to be my authentic self. I know my answer, but like, what can you say about it, right?
Yeah, I mean, what I will say, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too, as I imagine we're going to be quite in alignment,
Yeah.
is there's like anytime if we look at even other types of things, right? Like the love language book by Gary Chapman, and like what he teaches, like, oh, there's like a tendency of us to show love and want to receive love in a certain way. But we all appreciate these other ways. And like, even if somebody like shows their love through touch, right? They still can see, maybe not as strongly, when somebody does something nice for them. That could be a way of showing love too. So we all have all of these parts inside of us. So in many ways, like, my feeling is the more we can actually come in and realize, oh, we tend to get into our scripts. Like, we do this in our sex life, we do this in our
Yeah,
personal life, and we get into these scripts of, this is me and my authentic self.
this
But
is how
that
it
is
is.
one way we're showing up, and it's only this looks this way, and we actually go in to say activate these other parts of ourselves that are maybe dormant. What winds up happening is we wind up being a more full expression of our authentic self, not less, because we're living more fully from all of these different parts versus keeping some of them in hiding because maybe we have shame or guilt or judgment or fear or something else around keeping these other parts from actually having a place in who we truly are.
I just love that, because, and for me, when I say it's those emotional expressions, and we all have those emotions inside, and because of the scripts, because where we're coming from, we're more comfortable. Like some people more comfortable with sadness, say, rather than anger. Yeah,
Yes.
but that's bringing that fullness that actually, and I love it how the sex life can be big accelerator, right? Because it's boring, I want to do something, but actually it brings more fullness to our life as such. At any point, if you tell me get into anger, I can actually access my anger. Get into my sadness, I can access it. It's more that I have easy access to those parts, but we all have them because we all have all this range of emotions. So if we look
Yes.
at the range of emotions, we can all go through them, but somehow, yeah, we choose one, it's scripted, and that's what becomes very boring. And also, you know what women tell me quite often? It's like they're waiting for the right mood to be sexual, and the right mood is when I'm so happy and calm, and that's the only way that I can have sex. And then it becomes so boring. What about the anger? What about the wildness? What about the sadness? Why can't I have sex in all of those emotions? And for women, it's like, oh, can you do that?
Well, yeah, and I think one of the things there takes, like, the things to comment on there, takes us back to your original question around, like, how do we keep passion alive, which a lot of people don't understand the difference between desire and arousal. So men have a tendency to have desire first, arousal second. Women have a tendency to have arousal first, desire second. So the difference is desire is of the brain. So desire is like, oh, that person is cute, that person is sexy, like, oh, now, like, I'm thinking about them. Now my erogenous tissue response, right? So arousals of the body. So men, they think it typically, and then their body responds. Women, oftentimes, except for in new relationships, because of all the chemicals of new relationships, things are different. But once we reach that, past that new relationship energy, what tends to happen is, because we're not trained, we don't know this, we don't realize as women oftentimes that desire for most of us happens second. So first, there's all the things that start to get the woman aroused. So these are things like sensual massage, taking a bath, rubbing her feet, helping her drop the things that are confusing her head, not confusing, but constricting is the word I
Distracting.
want, distracting her head from the day, right? And so we do all these things to get her into her body first. Then we start, before we even get to our genitals, we start with things like, gently rubbing her breasts, not like how most men initially want to play with breasts, but like gentle rubbing breasts, right? Because that is what that is doing, is that is allowing her arousal energy to start to turn on. And then once we get aroused, and sometimes this is 15 to 20 minutes, that's when the desire tends to kick on. And that's why so many women, like, will enter a moment of intimacy and they'll be like, all right, I'm going to do this because I want to connect, but I'm really not in the mood. And then, like, 15 to 20 minutes into it, it's like, well, that was kind of awesome. Why don't we do that more often? And it's because we're waiting for the desire instead of creating the desire through arousal. We are opposite of men that way. It's like, nature's giant humorous science experiment.
Now it's a bit of the topic, but
Yeah.
why why isn't our clitoris inside of our vagina? That'd be so amazing, wouldn't
Yes.
it?
Yes, exactly. Because the other thing that we've seen that some studies have shown is, like, the ability for women to have orgasms vaginally is directly related to the distance between the clitoris and the vaginal opening, right? So, like, if it's further away, it's a lot
Very
harder to
difficult,
have.
yeah.
Right,
But why did
exactly.
nature do that? Then I was like,
I
why?
don't know. I don't have a good answer for that yet.
But it's a nice way when I say that to women. They're like, oh, so there's nothing wrong with me. That's what nature
Correct.
did. If it was inside, it would be such a different story. You'd be like, I just want penetration.
Exactly. Exactly. And this is so important for men to understand too, because I think there's just this desire, I think oftentimes through created through porn and culture and all these things around if I can't please her with my cock from the man, then there's something wrong with me or something wrong with her.
Mm,
And there's nothing wrong with anybody.
that's what
This
nature
is
did.
anatomy.
This is
This is just
anatomy.
anatomy.
Yeah, for
Yep.
whatever reason they decided, that's what they decided.
Correct.
And I believe maybe it's to do with communication and celebrating the differences. Then that's what
Yeah.
makes the difference. It's quite a profound
Yeah,
difference in the way we
it's true.
experience.
It's true. And it forces, I think communication is the right word because if this is done well, what it does is it really forces couples to come and talk about it. And that's why 92% of couples that say they have the best sex, they talk about it.
They talk
And
about
I think this is why, because, well, you have to know like slightly to the right, slightly to the left. Today is going to be slightly to the left, and tomorrow is going to be slightly to the right. And the woman's body is different every day. And I think it's important for women to know that because it's so easy to be like, well, what's wrong with me?
Mm,
And it's just that the female body wants different things on different days,
yeah.
and that's normal.
Yeah, and I just see it because I do group work with women, and it's just so amazing when women actually start talking about it with each other and they start, oh, I'm normal. And that's the biggest thing, the
Yes.
biggest shift that I see. So back to the topic though, right? So first one is
Yes.
people,
Yes. The second one to
how
create
to keep the
novelty.
passion alive, right? So yeah.
Correct. Yes. And so this is all like how to keep the passion alive. Subtext is novelty is one of your ways.
Mm.
And so how to create novelty then. So we said people, places, and things. The second one is places. So this is pretty self-explanatory around, hey, you can change like the location around your house. You can do it in the closet. Some people do it. And I've seen this. Like I
I
bring
was
up the
like, oh,
closet
I
because I
never thought
like
about that one in the closet. Okay.
I have one couple I've worked with where that's one of their hottest places. They just like love because it's like a place that their kids never find them, right? So closet sex is their jam. But you can find places in nature, right? So it's like a hot, beautiful hike out in the middle of nowhere, right? You walk back into the woods a little, you're totally alone.
That's what
Great
excites me. Yeah.
place,
Yeah,
right?
that's a
That
dream
like
too.
that can be
Mm.
really, really hot and exciting. So that's places. And then things, I put anything like, okay, a new position. And I really encourage people to get a sex position book. I'll talk about other ways you can find sex positions. But the idea with this is we get stuck in our ruts and we forget like so many things. It's like we forget sometimes around like, okay, other than the standard positions that a lot of people just have on their brain, your cowgirl, your reverse cowgirl, your doggy style, your missionary, and then kind of a standard like four, six things that a lot of people commonly rotate through. Sometimes it can just be like really difficult to think about, well, in the moment, what else do we do? And it can really trigger memory sometimes to like just flip through a book occasionally and be like, oh, I forgot about that position, or we've never tried that position. So you can bring novelty back in through positions.
And can I just
Other
say,
things,
like, can I
yeah,
just say, because for me,
yeah,
what comes up, what it brings from my experience, it actually brings playfulness. And that's what
yes,
we forget the playfulness, but especially with the positions, because it's going to be awkward if you're like, oh, let's try that. And then we can actually start laughing about it. We can be playful and it becomes so much lighter. And it's a different energy. Because I find that the playfulness goes so quickly. We start to take sex so seriously.
yes.
I feel like sex is all about playing. It's the intimate play.
It is. It is. And it's one of the places we look back to like childhood where we live in fantasy world of wizards and fairies and all the different ways that superheroes, all the different ways kids like play in their imagination. Intimacy and sexual intimacy is one of the only areas in adult life where it's like we kind of have freedom to, of course, with agreements and respect and consent and all the things. But as long as those things are met, we have the freedom to play and experiment in any way that we want, right? We can create our own worlds, we can create our own fantasies together, we can create our own situations, and all of that is available. And I'm glad you brought up the awkward in this too, because I find it to be like sometimes I came across something online where somebody was like, how to avoid awkward sex. In my mind, it's the
Go
question
for
is
it.
that's a very bad question. If you're trying to avoid awkward sex, you're probably not playing. Like every once in a while, my partner and I will be like rolling around and trying a new transition, and we bop each other on the head so hard that it stops the whole thing. And we could let it ruin the moment, but what we wind up doing is just giggling.
Yeah, and it
It's
creates
just
more
like
connection. It's just that ease. Actually, when people
correct.
can be awkward together, it's like that's the connection, huh?
It doesn't have to be a big deal. It's
Oh,
wow, how amazing is this that we get to now giggle for a while and then start over again and like start over from the play and the happy and the joy and all of that energy. So, yeah, if you're trying these things, it's gonna be awkward sometimes, and that's part of it. And like starting to just get to a point where, oh, embracing the awkward instead of avoiding the awkward.
yeah, beautiful. So, position what else from things?
So the other things I'll throw in there are things like this is where our vibrators come in. This is where some of our things like handcuffs or blindfolds or different music or sound. This is where we can get breath work. Tantra is a really fun thing to play with because people can feel huge different energy in their body, huge different sensations from different types of breath work or different sounds. Like even sounds, right? When we think about the sounds people make during sex, people get into their habits as well. This is the sound I make before I climax, right? That's often what happens. And while you can start to read your lover's cues and there's benefits of that, it's so sound, for example, is a huge way changing sound to have multiple orgasms as women, to stay in that 7, 8 range with 10 being climax and 0 being not turned on. And we stay in that 7, 8 range for longer. That tends to stretch out the orgasms. Instead of being seconds, they turn into minutes. And sound can do that. Breath can do that. So we can play with those things. These are things too in like the kink or the fetish world where we can bring in things like, okay, maybe we bring in a flogger, maybe we bring in some sort of paddle. And these things can be a lot for people in the beginning. Some people these things are not for, but the point is like to have a conversation and to open your mind up to all these different things around what are you interested in, what is your partner interested in, where are those overlaps of those things that you want to try. And I guarantee in the whole things world there will be things that you try and you're like, well, try a butt plug or something like that, that might not be for you. But when you try it, that is like, okay, we want more of this feels amazing, or that was a really cool experience. And now, like we've talking about, get to laugh about and bring that into our erotic joy.
Beautiful. Yeah, because and as you talk, and I just hear my couples that is like, ooh, this is whoa. But that's exactly where that communication that actually we need to talk about it. And it talks to me about not having enough that emotional intimacy where we can't, because it's such sex can be such a vulnerable thing. And we need to actually step into more emotional intimacy, and then we're able to have those conversations, and then we can have so much more play and fun and fulfillment. And leaning, if anyone, like what I want to say to listeners, if you're listening to this, whoa, I can never talk about my partner about this, that's a big sign for you. Actually, okay, something here is not quite open between us. So we need to lean into that. We need to start exploring what would it take for us to actually start to have those honest conversations with each other, because that's so
Yeah,
important, huh?
it is. It is. And there's like way we could probably have a entire 3-hour podcast on how to talk. But one of the tips I will give people just as a starting point is when we have these kind of conversations with our partner, one of the easiest places to start is what we love and what we want more of. Because what innately happens when we look at research around hard conversations, like from anything, like not taking sex off the table, there's always 3 threats to any hard conversation. There's a threat to the one individual, the threat to the other, and the threat to the group space. And what's been interesting in studies is when they take that same principle and they apply it to conversations of sex, out of those 3, there's one threat that is bigger than the other 2. And that one threat is the threat to the self, meaning if I'm going to have a conversation with my partner around sex, subconsciously or consciously, I am most worried about protecting myself naturally. He is most worried about protecting himself naturally, right? And so because of that, when these conversations come up, instead of coming into them like heartfelt, everybody's protecting their ego.
Mm.
And so one of the entry steps to initially having these conversations is when we do have these conversations, starting with things like, wow, and name something specific, be like, I just want you to know that when you did that thing the other day, and be specific about what it is, I just loved that. And I'm realizing I want more of it, because I just haven't told you this before. And that just makes me feel, and then name all the things that happens, and then stop there. And you'll start, some of the times you start getting more of it, but what it starts building is we start building that erotic safety around, oh, this is cool to talk about sex. So far, every time we've talked about sex, like I
No one
leave and I'm like,
died.
right, like look at all the things I'm doing right,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so we're building that safety. So eventually, when we get into, oh, and this other thing, I think I want to change this, there's so much safety because we're feeling so sexually strong, and like we're providing so much, that it's so much easier to hear each other without that ego part coming in and protecting.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's an important piece, I guess we're protecting. And that's how the more protection we have, the more tight it becomes, the more restricted it becomes, and then there's
Yes,
place. So yes, starting with actually appreciating, and also, and I call it finding your erotic voice, is the more we practice something, starts with something easy, like just how you touch me or something very easy, then our body on a kind of body level gets, actually this is safe. I'm okay, we're okay, nothing bad happened. And that takes a bit of time for the body to get used to the safety of talking about it. And then the excitement comes, like, oh, what else can I talk about? Beautiful.
exactly. Exactly. And then we can start to build on the novelty right from there. Once there's like this level of
Yeah.
safety, we realize we said this and it went okay and our partner
Mm,
received it. And then the conversation is around things like, okay, well, I listened to this podcast and they mentioned blindfolds, and I'm like a little bit curious about blindfolds. Like,
Blindfolds are
you
so
know,
good. And it's such an
they're
easy thing,
so good.
actually. They're so good, and it's such an easy thing. Yeah.
Exactly. And
Oh.
then we say, are you interested? And in these conversations, we have to be okay if our partner is not interested. But the
Mm,
more we can come in these conversations around curiosity,
mm,
and not taking a no as necessarily a hard no, but getting more information. So if somebody says, wow, like I'm really not into blindfolds, okay, there's so many different ways I'm exploring. And a response could be, there's so many different ways I'm excited to continue to explore sex with you. And I'm just curious. I just want to know you. I love you so much. What makes blindfolds not interesting? And oftentimes when we ask that question, we become curious. Then we can tease something apart around, okay, well, for some, like maybe they feel, well, the blindfold on, they're not going to be connected with their partner because they can't look in the eyes. And then it's, oh, you want to connect with me? Well, is there a way we can still associate that with the blindfold and still have that? Like maybe I put the blindfold on for 2 minutes and take it off. Or you can start to unravel if there's this kind of meeting ground where you get to explore that and the other person feels like, oh, yeah, in this way, I still feel connected. Or if it is a hard no, but there's plenty of novel things to try. So even if something is a hard no, it's no big deal. We just keep exploring and having these conversations until
mm,
we find something that is interesting and pleasurable for both of us.
mm. So beautiful. What I'm thinking now is that we should do another one just on communication.
I would love
I think
to.
that'll be
Yeah, we
so good.
can
Okay, so listeners, we're
definitely do
gonna do
that.
another one on communication because there's so much, and I really love how we're so aligned. It's like I hear what he says. Oh yeah, I would say the same thing. This is so cool.
I feel that too.
So maybe Diane, just if you feel into the listeners, yeah, the women who are in a long-term relationship and they feel like, oh, is this it? What would be your message to them? Like,
Yeah. So the question is message if they're like they still want to be in their
they
relationship.
want to be
But
in a relationship, but yeah.
the thing that I will say is pleasure is not just about desire, but something you require. And what I mean by that is oxytocin, the hormone of pleasure, that some people will try to do like 20-minute hugs, for example. 20-minute hugs raise oxytocin by 20 to 50%. Orgasms raise oxytocin by 200 to 500%. And what that means for you when your oxytocin is raised, cortisol, which we're all talking about these days, cortisol, your stress hormone, goes down, anxiety goes down, depression goes down. We say that it helps to balance hormones like estrogen and testosterone. And we see that sleep improves. So when I say that pleasure is about not just about desire, but something we require, it really is based upon the body has this amazing mechanism to heal itself. And pleasure and oxytocin is a huge part of what we do that. And you're worth it. And your life is worth it. And being able to self heal is worth it. And being able to connect more in your relationship is worth it. So if you're finding that orgasms are difficult, if you're finding that they've been difficult your whole life or just now, or you've never even had an orgasm, there's nothing wrong with you. This is actually fairly normal and fairly common. It just means that you haven't learned how yet. So please don't judge yourself for any of this. This is all just part of your journey. And there's ways that you can actually teach your body to heal and to have pleasure. And it's truly your birthright and your power to self regulate in many ways. You've got this.
Beautiful. I love it. It's like pleasure is deeply healing, and sex, we just need sex. We do,
We
but
do.
healing sex, pleasurable
Yes.
sex, deep
Yes,
sex. We do
exactly.
need that. Oh, this is so beautiful.
Exactly.
So tell me, how can listeners find more about you?
Well, a couple free gifts I'll give your audience are really the best way to get a hold of me. And the one is if you're interested in any of the novel things that I talked about and you want to do a checklist, you can download my yes, no, maybe checklist. And it's just a fun thing. It's like a quiz you can do with a partner, have a date night and go through. And I even talk about in the email where you get the yes, no, maybe ideas. I even give you some information on here's how to approach this with your partner, and here's how to make sure there's no shaming when you're doing this. You'll get some of that as well. That's super easy. It's mysexdoc.com. So if you go to mysexdoc.com, you can download that. And then the second thing that I think is worth to give your listeners for free is my free libido quiz, super easy as well, libidoquiz.com. And if you go there, what you'll find is a quiz that will help guide you into possible other root causes of low desire. And with that, you'll get information around ask your doctor about these tests or ask your doctor about those tests. I find oftentimes when there's low desire, one problem, there's many imbalances, but one imbalance oftentimes is something to do with an imbalance in the body. And people many times are not getting the full range of tests they need to do to find those root causes. So the libido quiz at libidoquiz.com, if you take that, that will help guide you to being an advocate for yourself with your doctor and getting you down the road of getting that proper testing done.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. It was such a, I love it, like how it is on it. That's so good.
Same, same. It was
Yeah,
truly a joy.
yeah, yeah. And listeners, we'll see you next week. Please post your questions so we can engage and answer your questions. Big, big hug. And I hope everyone this week is going to have really amazing, deeply fulfilling sex.
Me too.
Bye.